recording slide in my presentation. It's like, gotta channel my inner Charlotte here. So my name is Amanda Bratcher, and I am the horticulture agent in Lee County, North Carolina. It's really exciting to be hosting this again. We did this for the first time last year, and we had about 170 folks join us, about 400 people registered, and we eventually had more than 1,000 people view the recording. So it's really cool to see this happening again, and being able to have everyone come back and see what we've got going on here in North Carolina. Let's see here. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Go ahead and get that started. Just so it keeps me on schedule. So for those of y'all who are joining us, this is not the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. This is the pre-Knowledge is Pollinator Power Pep-Rally. The census is actually next week. We're going to talk about that and what that entails. I know that a lot of folks who are joining us did it last year, but there's quite a few folks who haven't. So, and I'd like to give a really solid shout out to Charlotte, Glenn, and the Extension Master Gardener, North Carolina Extension Master Gardener program for really taking this program on and bringing it to the state of North Carolina. I do have a new daughter and a new name from last year. And yes, my daughter has lots of insect and pollinator themed accoutrements. So today we are doing this in a Zoom style or in a webinar style. So that's why you're only seeing the speakers here. You please communicate. If you have a question during the speakers, please ask it in the Q&A section. That way we keep the questions separate. And then if you have just any comments or things you want to shout out or resources you want to share, you put that in the chat. And you can find all of those buttons at the bottom of the screen. I want to reiterate, it is being recorded, so don't worry about having to, if you have to drop out or leave early, this will be available to you at a later date. We're going to answer all the questions for the webinar at the end of everyone talking, just so we can get through everyone's presentations and hopefully get everyone out by 3 o'clock. I think we're really on time for that. And it also kind of helps. Sometimes other folks might answer your questions as we move through these presentations. So really the Knowledge is Pollinator Power webinar started kind of as a way to get everyone excited about the Great Southeast Pollinator Census, which is a citizen science program that is open to anyone in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. But a big part of what we do at Extension and what the Great Southeast Pollinator Census is trying to do is really get people excited and engaged with pollinators and pollinator gardening. And these lovely ladies who are joining us today are really full of some cool stuff. So I'm really excited for them to be able to share what they've been up to and their expertise. And also kind of wrap in how you guys can do the census in your communities. We have folks from all over the state of North Carolina, but hello everyone. If you're from out of the state of North Carolina, please say hello in the chat. We had folks register from Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, but also Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, and Alabama. And so it's welcome you guys. Unfortunately, this census is not really open in your state yet, but if you guys, if you're involved with your cooperative extension in your state, they can reach out and I'm happy to connect them with Becky. In North Carolina, we have quite a few folks from the mountains to the sea joining us today, which is really exciting. And there's quite a few counties who are joining us today that didn't even participate in the census last year. So if everyone from North Carolina did one count next weekend, we would add about 4 new counties to our count from last year. This is a shameless plug for North Carolina Cooperative Extension. I am an extension agent, and our mission is really to extend research-based knowledge to North Carolinians, but we also, a lot of us serve citizens of the United States as well as a lot of other places. So we're really here to provide research-based knowledge and and uh, and get everybody informed and make sure that you're not just using some random information off of the internet. I did get a text message, Charlotte, that chat is disabled for participants. And the other part of extension here in North Carolina, every extension master gardener program is run slightly differently in each state. But here in North Carolina, Charlotte Glenn is our fearless leader. And really, I think this embodies what the program is. The Master Gardener program is to connect people with the benefits of gardening. And it's county-based, research-based information, educational programming, and really to serve the citizens of North Carolina and use that gardening knowledge and know-how to benefit people and plants in the ecosystem. Here are our experts for today. Dr. Hannah Levenson. Oh, and look, everybody is Hannah Levenson apparently today. I knew that I had messed up a slide. I knew that I was going to do this as soon as I put this together. And it automatically changed too. I did test this. So before we get started with what the Great Southeast Pollinator Census is, I want to remind folks who this may be new information for you, or it may be kind of like, okay, I've been to all the pollinator programming in the world. I know everything there is to know about pollinators. So just lay on this really cool new information. But remember, if you are doing if you're telling your neighbors or your community or just somebody you're having coffee with, some people don't really care about pollinators. Or just because you know that they're important, some people might still be learning about why we should care about pollinators. And you don't have to be just a gardener to care about pollinators. So don't forget to remind people. There is a lot of hype. These are just like a few of the different programs that you may be familiar with in terms of like garden certification programs, but I mean, I feel like we see like at least a couple articles every week, save the bees, save the butterflies, save the insert animal here. But really, in all seriousness, pollinators are under threat. And Elsa and Hannah, you guys probably, I need to update this presentation, but there's a lot of extinction and mass extinction events happening all over the world. And we're still learning about insects and insect populations. We have so much to learn still. So let's not take that for granted. There are a lot of really great initiatives going on right now. I just saw the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation, which is a national organization, has launched an initiative to try and do a survey of all bee species in the United States, maybe even in North America. So there is hope, but there's a lot of reasons why pollinators are under threat. But you should care, because at the heart of it, what does pollination usually result in? Some sort of seed formation, which a lot of us, there are seeds in our fruit. So we like to eat fruit. So we need pollinators to pollinate our favorite fruit crops. But in most cases, I know there's going to be a few people who like raise their hand and go, well, what about, seedless, whatever, or, sterile fruit that just generates. Most fruit producing crops need an animal pollinator to actually form a fruit. We also like functioning economies. So without pollinators, we wouldn't have our fruit. We wouldn't have a lot of ecosystem services that are happening that kind of keep things humming along. I will tell you right now, our pollinators and a lot of our, just by Mother Nature doing her thing, makes things a lot cheaper. If anybody has ever had to plant a buffer, a riparian buffer, or repair a stream, or if you're managing habitat, you know that it can be very expensive. And just think, Mother Nature could do that, on her own. But with functioning ecosystems, there are a lot of benefits that we get without us having to do anything. And finally, I know a lot of folks, since a lot of us are master gardeners here and probably are passionate gardeners, there's kind of that like spiritualism that comes as well, where, you know, we love to see these animals visiting our gardens and being able to share those stories with our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors. And so there's a lot of benefits to gardening, and I think those benefits are enhanced by the presence of pollinators, because that, you know, we know innately that that signals that our gardens are healthy. So what is the Great Southeast Pollinator Census? It is at the heart of it a citizen science project. It is for people of all ages across Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida. And so it's not really, it's only on 2 days, on the 23rd and the 24th this year. It's always the fourth Saturday of August, and the dates are announced usually at the end of the year. And it has 3 main goals. The first one is to create sustainable pollinator habitat, whether that's a garden or people planting, you know, a field of wildflowers, or just adding some sort of place where there are flowering plants and host plants that pollinators can benefit from, you know, in our cultivated and managed spaces. The second purpose is to increase the entomological literacy of our citizens. Entomology is the study of insects. So don't let our big science words be too scary. This is so important. Entomology is an incredible field, and Elsa, Ezra, and Hannah are all entomologists. And also finally to generate useful data about pollinator populations. Just think about, for those of y'all who participated in the census last year, I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we got about the census is people were so amazed at how many insects were just on one plant in a 15-minute period. And if you think about that and extrapolate that to a backyard or a city or a county or a state, you know, all of these insects are just going about doing their thing. It really is an incredible amount of work that's getting done, but also it's an incredible amount of work to study that. So the more people we have laying eyes on plants and insects doing pollination activities, the more data and understanding we can have of them. So who can do the census? Anyone in the state of North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina. Florida is our new addition to this year, so we're really excited to have Florida joining us. It is the Great Southeast Pollinator Census, so those of y'all who are in the Southeast, however you define the Southeast, are welcome. We just need to get you guys added to the program. So if you're interested in joining us in 2025, please let me know. And it's for people of all ages. As long as you can stand there for 15 minutes with a data sheet, you can do this. The data sheet is very easy to use. Where do you do it? Anywhere that there is a plant that has pollinators landing on it. That's it. Wherever that is, can be in your backyard, in a park, botanical garden. We have some planters that we have put in Sanford that have pollinators visiting them, so you could theoretically do that. It doesn't have to be with a large group or an event. Although I will say there are quite a few master gardener programs and organizations across at least North Carolina that are doing events. So check out your local cooperative extension office. So you're going to observe the plant for 15 minutes. You're going to put a tally mark next to the insect that you see. And you're going to take a date, you're going to put a tally mark every time that insect lands on the plant, even if you think it's the same butterfly or the same bee that you've been watching. It's really about the time the insects land on the plants. And this is just for statistical analysis, because remember, we're trying to generate useful data, and it has to be taken the same way across the whole county or across the whole Southeast. There is a place on the 23rd and the 24th of August at the Great Southeast Pollinator Census website. If you go there on that day, there will be a quick button for you to input your data. I did it on my phone last year. It's very easy to do on a computer, on a phone. I did get some feedback that it was a little challenging on a tablet, but but that's just what it is. This is, and this is the data sheet from last year. Charlotte did her count on a Vernonia lettermanii, the ironweed. And it looks like she had quite a few bees and butterflies and a few bumblebees, but not much else. And that's what's really cool about this data is you can really see what different pollinators prefer. There are a few plants like mountain mint and a couple of others that can be so large and have so many insect pollinators visiting it. It can be challenging to kind of keep up for 15 minutes doing all those counts. I know some counties and some other folks, like they took a little hula hoop or a little crocheting circle and just kind of laid it on the plant and only counted what was inside of that circle. So it doesn't have to be the whole plant. It can just be a section of a plant. It's whatever you can humanly count. So the counting sheet is very simple. It's in Spanish as well. So if you have a Spanish speaking population or neighbors who you want to serve, or if we have folks here who speak Spanish, we have a Spanish version as well. And there are lots of resources on the website that are free for anybody, not just teachers, but also citizens. There's an identification guide to help folks, as well as a little quick pamphlet that's just a one-pager. So we really want folks to have the information that they need to do this successfully without having to have a bunch of background knowledge. This is really supposed to be accessible. And the counts are just easily uploaded at the Great Southeast Pollinator Census website. You don't have to put in anything fancy. It's a really quick thing. There are also certificates and stickers that you can print. So for folks who are doing have teachers or have classes or are doing events, or I know we have a lot of 4-H folks who have done this. Having a little bit of something for the parents and the kids to take home can be fun. And the sticker this year is a fly, so very appropriate for Ezra to join us. Then there is social media in the website and a newsletter. So if you want to learn more about it, you can sign up for those things. There has already been data published, or there has been articles published with the data already. So if you go to the Great Southeastern Pollinator website and look up resources, these are the different studies that have been published and used to understand what's going on with the data. A real quick shout out, I think I'm almost to time on my thing, but how did North Carolina do last year? That was the first year. So we did have folks from mountains to the sea participate. We had 67 of 100 North Carolina counties participate. So I'd love to see that closer to 100. And we had more than 1,400 counts total. So that means that's amazing that 1,474 plants were watched for 15 minutes over the course of last year. Only 248 counts were completed as part of an event. So the other 1,200 were done by individuals in a backyard, which is really cool. We did have some new pollinator gardens created, and hopefully some folks were inspired or maybe inspired to go out and plant one this fall. A lot of local cooperative extension offices offer gardening programs around pollinators. So if you're interested in starting a pollinator garden next year for a count, please reach out to your local cooperative extension office. And by participating in the census, people felt like they knew a lot more about the benefits of gardening and how gardening benefits insects. These were in surprising numbers, I think, for folks. So a lot of people always focus on honeybees, and the state is really looking at all of the different insect pollinators. If you'll notice, only 3,700 of all the insects that were counted were honeybees. So it was the lowest observed or the lowest counted insect of all of the different groups. It looks like butterflies and moths and bumblebees were the highest counted insect groups. And these numbers varied wildly from location to location, and depended on what plant folks were observing. Some real quick ones are hyssops, butterfly bushes, Joe Pye weeds, sunflowers, and lantanas were really popular for observation. Mountain mints, black-eyed Susans, salvias, verbenas, and zinnias were also very popular. So if you've got something different in your community, take a look at it. But those are really, really popular with pollinators in August. Real quick to inspire you guys, if you haven't participated in the census before, please consider doing it. But there's kind of three main ways you can participate. You can do it in your own backyard, on your own, or with your family. You can do the census as many times as you want on as many different plants as you want. I know some folks have told me that they want to observe the same plant throughout the day just to see what kind of different pollinators show up on it. So, and if you are an Extension Master Gardener volunteer in North Carolina, you can also get volunteer credit for participating in the census. And if you're doing it, you should have a friend do it with you too. So spread the word around and inspire other folks to participate. On our North Carolina website, which you did get in your email, there is an actual folder, Google folder that you can go to that has a bunch of marketing materials that you can just download and use on your own social media. And finally, if you're really, really inspired and you got a group of folks that you want to get together with and galvanize the community, host your own event, educational event. And for those of y'all who are listening and already know that they're hosting an event, please let us know that you're hosting an event. We would like to learn more about how your event goes. And we have a separate evaluation that we would love to send you after the census. So it's not just about what all those of us who are sitting here today. It's about our communities in North Carolina and in the southeastern United States. So without further ado, I think I'm a few minutes over time, which is exactly why we built in a little bit extra time. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and everybody being Hannah Levenson. And I'm going to introduce Hannah Levenson and Elsa Youngsteadt, doctors Hannah Levenson and Elsa Youngsteadt, who are both from NC State. So Hannah is a community ecologist, broadly interested in investigating how humans impact the environment and exploring ways to mitigate those impacts. The main tools she uses to explore this are beneficial organisms, particularly pollinators in agricultural settings. Hannah is a bee expert with experience researching both native bees and honeybees in the United States and in international settings. Currently, in her postdoctoral work, she is the head of the Specialty Crops IPPM lab and a co-PI on a multi-state USDA-funded grant focused on making the management of an invasive fruit fly more sustainable in berry crops in collaboration with 10 different universities and several USDA offices across the U.S. And am I right in saying that spotted wing Drosophila? Yeah, y'all are going to hear more about that, I'm sure, soon. And then Dr. Elsa Youngsteadt is an associate professor and urban ecology extension specialist in the Department of Applied Ecology at NC State University. The Youngsteadt lab investigates the effects of urbanization and climate change on insects, including bees and ants. Elsa also manages a native bee extension and outreach program and developed outreach materials that are used statewide, including guides to bee identification and nesting habitat for North Carolina. Elsa grew up in Missouri and spent a few years in Wisconsin before settling in North Carolina, where she completed a PhD in entomology and worked as a science writer and editor for several years before returning to ecological work. And those two resources, I sent them in this email. That's the Bee Identification of North Carolina and the Bee Hotel outreach materials. Those are in your emails, but also I will send them out with the recording. So without further ado, ladies, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. We'll share my screen really quickly and let me know if there's a problem, but I'm going to keep going like we're good to go. Okay, so Elsa and I are going to talk to you about a project we are doing in collaboration with the Consumer Horticulture and Youth Working Group at NC State. talking about managing perennial stems for overwintering pollinators. And the point of talking about this project is to give you an example of how gaining better understanding of pollinators, what species we have, where they are, how that can actually help us, and why it's so important to learn that information, especially when we're thinking about managing the land, doing conservation actions. The first step is really learning some of this deeper information. But before we get started, I wanted to remind myself, we have a couple poll questions for everyone. If we could have the poll questions up. Okay, so the first question, if you all could put in the information, we're asking, in what month do you usually cut back the dead perennial stems in your garden if you are managing your garden? And then we have a couple choices there.
And Hannah, while we're waiting for those answers to roll in, I don't know if you saw Ezra's chat. You're in presenter view, so we can actually see 2 slides right now. Like we're seeing the.
Oh, I cannot see the chat. Thank you. Let me end this and then. Okay, is that better? What if I do that?
Still presenter view.
Elsa, do you want to just share yours?
The version that I have is only my slides. Let me go.
So quick suggestion is if you'll start the PowerPoint and then share. You should be able to
Start it
select
and
your
then share.
presentation.
Okay, because I have used this computer before and
Yeah, it looks fine when we tried it earlier.
that's today. That's just today. All right. Tell me if that looks okay.
That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda. That was perfect. Okay, I don't know how we're doing on the poll. We do have one more question.
Yep, we're good. I'm going to end it. So we've got 92 out of 122 participants responded. And
okay, that's
results.
pretty good. Okay, March, April. Okay, yes. Very interesting. A few I don't. Okay. And then we could go to poll number 2. All right, so this question is, what have you heard about the best time of year to cut back perennial stems? So it could be the same as what you answered for question 1, but if you've heard something different, you can answer that here, and it's just general season rather than specific months.
Like our responses have really slowed down. We've got 80% responding.
Okay.
Yes, I will end the poll and share the results.
Awesome. Okay, so mostly hearing spring, it looks like. Okay. Very interesting. All right, well, we will find out more about this. Okay, so this project started because we were getting a lot of questions where people wanted to make sure they were kind of managing their garden appropriately. They wanted to make sure they were protecting the wildlife and especially the pollinators that we're all hoping to support with this habitat. And some of you may have done this same thing. Elsa and I went online when we got all these questions, and you can see all these different answers pop up online. Sometimes it's conflicting answers that say completely opposite times of the year. A lot of it is based on opinion or assumptions or someone's like casual observation. We couldn't find a clear answer that made sense to us that was also supported with evidence from going out to gardens and seeing what made the most sense. So with the working group, we decided that it was time to figure it out. And so we started this project where we could get actual information and provide you all with actual answers based on what happens in the garden itself. And so just a little bit more background. So right now, you could consider that there's a pollinator garden boom happening. This upper map is showing one example of a program called the Million Pollinator Garden. And all of those dots show an area of pollinator habitat that was planted in the US. And it goes into Canada and Mexico. We're not even showing other parts of the world. So this really is taking off, which is really amazing and really great. It also adds some beauty to the landscape. You can see the picture on the bottom left. But at some point in the year, all of this habitat is going to look like the picture on the bottom right. It's all going to go dormant. The wildlife is going to go dormant. Things are going to be used how they are going to be used for that year. And maybe your neighbors aren't going to be very happy with how this garden looks over the winter. But what do? How are we supposed to manage this to make sure that we're actually supporting and still protecting the wildlife that we know is living in there? So that's what we're hopefully going to talk to you about today. And I want to start with introducing you. There's a lot of different insects that will be in the garden. We are going to focus on bees, obviously, for this webinar. And you can see from this slide that bees are extremely diverse. They come in all shapes, different sizes, different colors. They can live differently from each other. And all of that plays into this decision making where we really need to keep in mind all of these differences when we're making decisions. And that can help inform us. So to give you a sense of the diversity, in North Carolina, there's more than 560 different species of bees just in North Carolina. In North America, there's more than 4,000, and in the world, there's more than 20,000. So you can see how this can become pretty complicated. There's a lot of intricacies, but we need to start keeping these in mind when we're thinking about managing our landscapes. So I'll give you a really brief overview of some things to keep in mind and how bees can be different from each other. So we'll talk about size, where they live, how they live, and what they eat. So the first thing is size. On the left side of the screen, we have the smallest bee in the world. It's called Perdita minima. It is 0.08 inches, so very tiny. And then on the other side, we have the largest bee in the world, Megachile pluto, which is 2.5 inches long. So very different from each other. These are the two extremes, really, and there could be any species that's sized in between these two. And when bees emerge as adults, they emerge fully grown. So that Perdita is not small because it needs to grow. It's just going to be a small bee. And the size of the bee can play a role in how it interacts with the landscape, what services it provides. So it does change how that species interacts with the ecosystem. So then where bees live, there are 4 broad categories of nesting material that bees can use. First, we have soil nesters. So a female will dig underground into the soil, build these tunnels. You can see there, they can be quite extensive. And that's where she lays her eggs that then develop into the next generation of bees. Bees can also build their nest in wood. It could be dead sound wood or dead rotting wood, depending on the species. Bees can also nest in stems. So that could be, these are bamboo reeds in a bee hotel, for example, but it could also be stems in a garden, like what we're talking about today. And then we have cavity nesters, where there is a big open area and some species then fill that in with their nest. And one point I want to make, so some examples of cavity nesters are honeybees and bumblebees. Those are probably some of the bee species that we know the most about, but they're actually pretty unique in the bee world. Less than 1% of bee species live that way, but we know the most about them. On the other hand, more than 70 or about 70% of bee species live underground in the soil. And we definitely know less about these other nesting types. And so it really is important that we start learning about all these different bee species that play different roles in our landscapes. Okay, so now we know where they live. How they build their nests within these nesting materials can also differ. So for time, I'm just going to keep this really brief. I'm happy to answer questions about it later if people are interested. But basically, bees have differing levels of sociality. So I'm showing a gradient. I'll talk about the 2 extremes. But there's lots of variation that can happen in the middle of these 2 extremes. So on one side, we have solitary bees. Those are females that build nests on their own, lay their own eggs, collect their own food. They do everything on their own, and typically they're on an annual life cycle. They don't even meet the young and the eggs that they lay. The other side of the spectrum, we have highly eusocial species. So there's many individuals that live in one nest. They work together to do all of the tasks needed to keep that nest up and running. They take care of the young together. There's overlapping generations. Usually it's a perennial nest lasting year after year. The example there is honeybees. So you can see very different lifestyles. That's going to dictate the role they play in the landscape as well. And I also want to know highly eusocial species. An example is honeybees. We know a lot about honeybees. They're also, in this case, very unique in the bee world. Less than 5% of bee species live this way. The majority, over 90%, are living solitarily. So again, we know the most about these very unique species. And as we're moving towards concerns about pollinators, working to conserve them, it is important that we start learning about these other species. And then now that we know what's going on in the nest, what they feed their young and what the bees eat can also be different. So again, a gradient, I'm talking about the two extremes. One side, we have specialist pollinators. That's where a bee needs to visit a specific family, genus, species of flower to successfully collect resources, feed that to their young. That usually results in a mutualist relationship where that plant then needs that bee for pollination. So the example here is a squash bee and a squash flower. So really specific relationships. The other side of the extreme is the generalist pollinators, where if a flower produces nectar or pollen, not all do, but if it does, a generalist pollinator could probably collect that resource, feed it to its young, and successfully raise its young that way. So again, you can see how all of this starts to build on itself, and it's all important to keep in mind. And that also then can help inform us when we're making land management decisions. Who is there? What do they need? What kind of role do they play? How are my actions going to affect them? And so for the case of our project we're talking about today, when we're thinking about a garden, the specifics that we can think about with this is that we're probably going to talk most about stem nesters. I will give you a hint today. That is what we're talking about, some stem nesters specifically. We're mostly going to be thinking about solitary bees. So they are not living in a colony. There aren't high numbers of them like the species that do live in colonies. For the most part, they're generalists. So they are going to visit a wide variety of flower species. And they're usually smaller bodied, especially when they're living in stems. They're limited in the size there. So it's not going to be the large carpenter bees that we're talking about. And then for time, I'll go through this really quickly just so we keep it in mind. There's a general life cycle of bees where an adult female will build her nest. She lays her egg. That develops into a larva, eventually into a pupa, emerges as an adult, and the whole life cycle starts over again. And the biggest thing I want to note here is that depending on the species, this life cycle could take a month or it could take up to a year. And that plays a role in the project we're talking about today. So with that, I'll move into our specific project. And when we're thinking about bees in our garden, we have flowers, they're blooming, things are visiting them, wildlife is using it, we're leaving it for the birds. But when do we cut it back? When is it safe to cut back for this wildlife? So I will turn it over to Elsa at this point.
All right, cool. Thanks, Hannah, for getting that all set up. And let's see if I can share my screen. Okay. So to get at this question of when is it actually safe to cut back the stems in your garden and tidy up without throwing away the insects that you actually want your garden to support, we worked with the Consumer and Youth Horticulture Working Group to conduct a little study across the state of North Carolina, where we worked with volunteers and extension agents representing 10 counties and 20 different gardens across the state in the outlined counties. And before I get into the details, I have to acknowledge everybody who was involved in this project. It took a village, including the members of the working group. The working group also provided some funding for the project. We had many volunteers and coordinators who collected the samples and organized the collecting of samples, and undergraduates who split thousands of stems. So that's who was involved. What did we actually do? I want to walk you through the sampling protocol so you've got a clear picture of the study, and I want to make sure that sampling protocol is squarely rooted in the seasonal timing of garden activities. So I want you to think of sort of an average perennial plant, and the first year that it's going to bloom in its life, it will of course send up leaves first in the spring, and then it will flower maybe in the summer, depending on the plant. And then in the fall, those flowering stalks and leaves will die back. And if you don't tidy up, those will remain intact on the plant throughout the winter. And then they will continue to stay in place the following year as new leaves come up from the same plant, that plant sends up new flowering stalks, and then those stems also die back. So we can think about any given stem on kind of a 2-year cycle. After the second year, it's kind of disintegrated and we won't think about it anymore. And the question of garden cleanup really comes up in the fall. So we're going to think about these stems kind of toward the end of their first season, when they've started to die back. And then we're going to follow these autumn stems through the next 4 seasons to see who's using them and when. So the first step in the sampling protocol in this data collection was that in late fall of the first year, each participating garden trimmed back about 100 stems in their whole garden to a stubble of 18 to 24 inches. And this was actually something we added kind of on the fly because volunteers were worried that their plants would just sort of be top heavy and fall over and they wouldn't have stems come spring, even if they didn't do some trimming. But we were able to confirm that insects were not being removed in those cutoff parts. So that was the prep step. They selected their cohort of 100 stems to follow through the seasons and trimmed them. And then they took the first sample of 20 to 30 stems in the winter before last frost in February. So when any overwintering insects should still be in place in those stems. Then the following spring in April, May, the plant would have new foliage, but they collected another 20 to 30 stems from that original cohort that was trimmed the previous fall. Did that again in the summer. And then in the fall, and at this point, these stems are pretty much like a full year plus old. And at each time point, they collected stems and shipped them to us at NC State. And we split every single one to see what was inside. And if there were any insects, we collected them to identify. So altogether, we had 68 samples come in for this project with 2,356 individual stems. We were definitely nervous when we started this. We hadn't really actually interacted with many stem nests in life. Like, are we looking for the literal needle in a haystack? We're not going to find anything. But when you open 2,000 stems, you find things here, examples of a few of the nests that we found in the samples. Sometimes we also found adult bees. So altogether, out of our 2,000 some stems, 35 individual stems had live bees or solitary wasps inside, which is 1.5% of the total stems. So not a lot, but they did come from 12 out of the 20 gardens, and 22 out of the 68 samples contained occupied stems. And then if you consider stems that had sort of identifiable evidence of residents that maybe weren't alive at the time we received them, the total goes up to 41 stems. So when you include all of those stems with some identifiable evidence of someone nesting in them or having nested in them, we found a total of 12 species of bees and wasps living in these garden stems, and we found them in 20 different kinds of plants. By far the most frequent occupants were bees in the genus Ceratina, or sometimes you'll hear it Ceratina. They're the small carpenter bees. We also found a few leaf-cutting bees, yellow-faced bees, different kind of leaf-cutting bee, and then some solitary wasps. I'm not going to go into the wasps, but just as a side note, they are also good neighbors. Sort of yellow jackets and hornets give everybody a bad rep, but these are sort of mild-mannered wasps that are solitary, not aggressive. They hunt caterpillars and grasshopper type things in your garden. And because Ceratina was such a common resident, I want to give you a quick look at this bee. For scale, this is about the size of like a grain of rice or a large ant. They're close cousins of the large carpenter bee that like drills in your deck, but they don't do any damage. They nest exclusively in pithy plant stems. And they don't get much attention as pollinators, but they're certainly around and visiting flowers and have the potential to be contributing to pollination in your garden. You might also like to know what kinds of stems were occupied. And this little chart lists the kinds of stems across the top and the kinds of residents across the side. And the darker the box, the more commonly we found that combination of that resident in that stem. So the point is we found relatively a lot of residents in coneflowers, in goldenrods, in ironweeds. Eupatorium turned up a few times, so did hibiscus, eutrochium. To give you a few actual species, we didn't always have species information on the stems we received, but when we did have it, some of the favorites that were most occupied, if you're looking for, yeah.
We're at time. How much time?
I will keep it moving.
Okay.
So these are a few of the species that you might want to plant if you're looking to support stem nesting bees and wasps. And then to circle back to our original question of when the stems were occupied, when can you tidy up without sort of trashing your neighbors? I'm going to show you the results in a graph here. It's aligned with the seasons, and it's going to show you the probability that a sample was occupied by bees relative to the season. So in winter, we found in the first winter that a stem was no longer alive. We found 0 bees or wasps in any part of the plant, including the parts that were trimmed off. In spring, nearly 70% of the samples had at least one occupied stem, so this was prime nesting season. Still occupied in the summer, things dropped off a little in the fall, but there were still some occupied nests, and those are the stems, and those are the nests that are going into overwintering. Nests are adult bees. So together, these results really suggest that winter is the first winter that a stem is not alive is the safe time to trim it and cut it back. That's when nobody's in there. And then come spring, you're going to have like an influx of residents moving into those stems, and it might be an especially bad time to actually be cleaning up the garden and removing those resources. So going back to what you find on the internet, some of this well-meaning advice about waiting late into the spring might actually be counterproductive. And instead, we would recommend actually only trimming your stems in the first winter after they flowered. And by trim, we mean leave sort of a tidy stubble of 18 to 24 inches that actually creates habitat. And after that time point, throughout the following year, nests and residents are possible. So you do not want to interfere with those stems after that point. Instead, you can just let those trimmed stems kind of break down naturally and unobtrusively. And so overall, this practice increases the amount of habitat available to stem nesting bees, even beyond what would happen if you didn't tidy up your garden at all. So hopefully, this will give you some kind of new insights into the seasonal cycle of how organisms are using stems in your garden. Trim them in their first winter, then leave them alone. And hopefully you will enjoy the habitat that creates and the residents that it attracts. And if there's time, we've got one last poll question for you. Maybe that can run during the transition. So thanks so much for being here. Sorry, we're running over. Questions will be at the end, so we do want to hear them. Please hold your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. I'm definitely excited about that list that you generated. I know a lot of folks really want to get that, so I'll make sure we get to share that. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and thank you everybody for keep answering those poll question. So Ezra Bailey is a third-year PhD student studying the evolution and classification and feeding habits of flies, particularly blowflies and their close relatives, but she loves all things insects. She uses DNA sequences to understand the evolutionary relationships between flies of economic and ecological importance in order to improve our communication of insects that are critical to human and ecosystem well-being. Flies are remarkably diverse are a remarkably diverse and human-associated group with little known but massive impact on our planet as parasites, decomposers, and pollinators. Ezra is passionate about sharing her love of flies through community outreach and showing off the many roles of this underdog group. And I'm super excited about this. So without further ado, you take it away, girl.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here. I will just share my screen real quickly. And if I can get a thumbs up from Amanda that everything looks good here. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Amanda. And thank you, Hannah and Elsa, for that awesome presentation. Like Amanda said, my name is Ezra Bailey. I'm a PhD student over at North Carolina State University and super excited to tell y'all a little bit about flies as pollinators. Flies have a ton of different roles, and I'm very interested in studying the whole gamut, but particularly parasitism and decomposition. And what Amanda was talking about with organizing, classifying the evolutionary history looks a little bit like this. And so this is kind of the work that I'm doing for my project with my lab and my program, is taking genetic sequences and using some very cool mathematic processes to be able to organize life into a way that we can understand and communicate the vast diversity of these super cool groups. So without further ado, what on earth is going on with flies? When you're thinking about flies, you're probably thinking about some annoying mosquitoes, maybe a horsefly that bit you when you were a kid, house flies or drain flies that get stuck in your house. But flies actually have an absolute ton going on with them. True flies, so anything with two wings, is going to make up order Diptera. Di meaning two, ptera meaning wing. If it only has two wings, it's a true fly. And this order is the most ecologically diverse order of animals on planet Earth. It's up there, close in numbers to beetles, moths and butterflies, bees, ants, and wasps. Those are like four of the biggest groups of insects, and flies are right up there. It's made of about 150 different families, comprising 180,000 species at least. Definitely going to be way more out there. Just like with all insects, there's so much to describe, but we're looking at right now, we've counted about 200,000 so far. And when we're talking about flies, I'm going to be using the term maggot. So an immature fly is called a maggot, a fly larva. So that immature insect that is going to go through metamorphosis, it's holometabolous, it has distinct life stages. That immature life stage is called a larva, and in flies, we're going to call those maggots. And they do actually look a little bit similar to bees, actually. I know most people might get a little bit nervous hearing the word maggot. They're worried about being dirty. I think they're actually quite cute and underrated. And you can see little baby bees going through their development over there, not too far off. The beautiful flies are found absolutely worldwide and highly abundant. One thing about flies that we always love showing off is just how they're found in every imaginable environment. They have every feeding habit you can think of, every niche. We have flies that live in the most high salinity lakes on the planet, the Great Salt Lakes. We have flies that survive in oil spills. We have flies that live in Antarctica, one of the few animals that can survive at the very bottom of the planet. There are flies that only breed on the antlers of fallen antlers off of moose. Like, it is absolutely ridiculous how many niches that they've really come across. And what's really awesome is that flies are ubiquitous and very comfortable around humans. So this little fly to the right that you see, this is called a blowfly. This is the group that I study the most. Love all flies, but this is my baby. Blowflies are very comfortable on humans, and we can call that being synanthropic. Syn meaning with, anthropy meaning human, very comfortable around people. And in general, flies are going to fill a lot of niches, but they're most highly relevant in a few different categories. These are going to be decomposers. So this blowfly to the right, they're going to feed mostly on things like roadkill, carrion, so dead animals, and putting those nutrients back into the ecosystem when otherwise they would be spreading disease, because we need decomposers to break down dead animals so we can get the nutrients back, and that we're getting that bacteria taken care of as soon as possible, because lots of bad diseases from that. In addition, a lot of flies are amazing biocontrol because they're excellent predators. So this flower fly on the right, its maggot, its larval form, are actually incredible predators of a lot of important garden pests. So aphids, thrips, scales, a lot of these flower fly larvae as maggots are incredible predators of them and save a lot of fruit and flowers in your garden from being attacked by a lot of different pests. Of course, we can't talk about flies without talking about disease vectors. The mosquitoes, the most dangerous animal on planet Earth, and there are a lot of important diseases that are vectored by flies. But back to the good stuff, flies are also super important food sources. and are really critical for a lot of bird populations, a lot of predatory insect populations, to be a very consistent source of nutrients. And finally, what we're going to talk about today is flies as pollinators. So an example to the right, very cute bee fly. These guys are unbearably cute, have a lot of seedy or hair on them, which is super useful for pollination. And we can get right into that. So how are flies pollinating so well? This is kind of a big claim. We're always thinking about bees. We're thinking about butterflies, moths. Those are the kind of pollinators that we're imagining. So what's going on with flies? Well, in several studies, if you take a look at the families that are pollinating major crops, gardens, and everything, after bees are number one in here, of course, but after bees, flies are actually in 3 of the top 10 families responsible for pollination. Hoverflies, the ones that we just saw a minute ago, blowflies, also saw those, and even common houseflies are within the top 10 families of insects that are visiting crops and contributing to pollination. And the funny thing about that is that fly pollination is actually largely pretty coincidental. Most flies are not relying on pollen. They're not feeding pollen to their young. They're not eating it themselves. They're often visiting for feeding on nectar is a major reason that they're visiting flowers. It's a great energy source. The flies, they're not collecting pollen. They're not eating it. They have no specialized collection structures, or corbicula are what they're called in bees, those cute little pollen baskets for getting everything together. They're really not built for that. So how are they such invaluable pollinators if they're not intending to pollinate, in huge quotes, because we know that their importance isn't, they're not trying to or aiming to, but they're not built for? Why are they so good at it? Well, there's some really major advantages to fly pollination. For one, flies are highly synanthropic and highly abundant. If you took a random fly, it's probably going to be laying somewhere around 300 eggs every 2 weeks. So these guys are absolutely everywhere. They're by human dwellings frequently. They're in areas where it might be difficult, hostile environments, areas with a lot of smog, poor air quality. Flies are totally fine in those, and they're all around, and they're constantly continuing their life cycle. They're hardy in many hostile environments, and these can be human-made environments, or these can be things like the tops of mountains. These can be extremely cold areas. These can be areas that are difficult for most insects to survive in based on the temperature, the weather conditions. Flies do pretty well in very windy areas. Most flies have a pretty low threshold for how cold they can survive, as well as a pretty high threshold for how hot something can get. So they're doing well in a lot of hostile environments. And finally, because flies are generally not relying on flower products, but can still certainly benefit by drinking nectar, those less rewarding flowers that a lot of insects might not be visiting, understandably, those are actually really great sites for flies. And those are often used for mating with other flies or hunting prey that is often feeding on those plants. So flies are really special in being able to fill some pretty major niches of pollination requirements that would otherwise lead to pretty bad plant decline because of these issues. Overall, flies are likely second only to bees as far as pollination efforts. And in general, we're going to see the most important fly pollinators. They are doing the heaviest lifting in hostile environments such as like alpine forest, subarctic environments, or really high altitude or high latitude areas. So tops of mountains, super far north, super far south. And of those 150 fly families that we have, roughly half of them, about 71, are all pollinating in natural and agricultural systems. So we don't see a ton of issues where we only see them in like major fields, but we never see them in gardens. They're pretty generalist all around. And a lot of those hairier flies, like that cute little bee fly to the bottom, these guys are just absolutely fantastic. Can carry thousands of pollen grains because they have so many seedy, they have so many hairs on them that even without having specialized structures to carry pollen, they're still moving a lot of it around. To think in agricultural context, a few numbers, flies are contributing to the pollination of roughly 70% of crops. And these are not minor crops either. These are strawberries, blackberries, tomatoes, like these are pretty major crops. They're also less impacted by land use changes. And in addition, they're really good at navigating in altered habitats. Flies generally do very well in areas where there are fluctuations in humidity. They're doing great with really low temperatures, really high temperatures, and they're really fine with being around humans, whereas many insects might try to stay away from human activity. And very interestingly, flies have actually seen some great use as pollinations about bringing huge numbers of flies in greenhouses and high tunnels. They work really well in there. So what exactly are flies pollinating? What are they most interested in? Where are we seeing them the most? Well, flies are going to act as both very generalist pollinators, just kind of popping around to whatever they need, especially if they're not looking for nectar or pollen, and they just happen to be on flowers to mate or to hunt. They'll be a little bit of everywhere, but also there's some very highly targeted and specific pollinators. You'll be pleased to know that chocolate is near exclusively or potentially exclusively pollinated by the chocolate midge seen on the right. And all of those hairs on him are really helping get as many pollen grains as possible between plants. Mangoes and coffee, you might be familiar with the blowflies, those little shiny green flies that we saw a little bit earlier. Those are often on roadkill and carrion and garbage. They're also responsible for mangoes and coffee. And I'm sure there's always going to be a few minor incidental pollinators, but in general, like these guys are taking care of like 90–95% of the efforts. In boreal farmland, caraway is pollinated again near exclusively by flower flies. And so those really cute ones that also have those predatory larval stages. And so they're able to assist with taking care of plant pests in addition to increasing the pollination transitions between different individuals. And again, with those awesome carrion flies, the largest flowers in the world, Morphophallus and Rafflesia, are pollinated exclusively by carrion flies. So if you can imagine, these flowers do in fact smell like dead things. And so that is a very cool example of coevolution between flies that are going to roadkill and carrion and these really awesome, beautiful plants. In general, flies are important pollinators for a lot of different commercial and hobbyist plants. A long list here, but just as a few examples, things like carrots, strawberry, blackberry, tea, bananas, a lot of very major, common, and widely available items. So what kind of impact are they making? We have an idea of which families are like most important for pollination, but what are like some numbers on that? Well, we know that flies are the dominant pollinators where bees are scarce. So they're always assisting with general pollination. They're always going to be found in gardens very frequently. And often it might actually be misidentified as a bee because a lot of flies do mimic bees, as you can see over on the right. A lot of, especially flower flies, very commonly put on a little bit of like honeybee coloration as a defense mechanism. So flies are going to be dominant pollinators where bees are scarce. And in addition, we're going to see that flies actually have more flower visits than bees overall, despite being slightly less efficient per flower visit. So they're visiting multiple times for mating, for hunting, to lay eggs, but you know, they're not quite as fluffy as honeybees and bumblebees and all those beautiful photos that Hannah and Elsa showed us. They have a massive estimated value annually for what their pollination efforts are really contributing to the agricultural industry. And those numbers are all over the place. It's very hard to quantify these numbers, but very likely globally in the hundreds of billions of dollars. When thinking about the groups that are most important, we're going to see flower flies, bee flies, and blowflies are especially efficient within pollination. The flower flies on the right, you can see these guys are all over the place. And if you keep an eye out, you might notice that you actually see these guys more frequently than you thought that you did. Flowerflies and bee flies together contribute as much as bees to pollination globally. And flowerflies in particular, I love talking about these guys, as you can see on the bottom, are predatory on a lot of different garden pests. So that at the bottom is an example of a flowerfly maggot or larva predating on some true bugs. And so these guys are predating on aphids, thrips, leafhoppers, scales, mealybugs, psyllids, whiteflies, and more that we just haven't even gotten to record yet. So thinking about how can we attract flies? These guys are number 2 after bees. They're all over, they're super abundant, and they are visiting flowers super frequently. We'd like to get as many as we can in our gardens. No worries about that, they will be there no matter what. But if you'd like to see some additional ones and get some of those benefits of the biocontrol that you get from so many flies being predatory, especially as larvae, there are a few things that you can do. We always want to, of course, prioritize native plants, but prioritize a variety of native plants that flies might prefer. So far, we understand that families Asteraceae, Rosaceae, and Apiaceae are all very appealing to flies. So this is going to be sunflowers, daisies, roses, and carrots are all very appealing to flies, and we see them consistently visiting those. In addition, as far as the shape of the flower, flies tend to like either very funnel-like or very flat and open flowers that are in large clusters. So any of these very common ones, lantana might be a good example, are going to be great to try to put into your garden. As far as some general ideas for getting a variety of insects into your garden, but especially flies, you'll want to have access to water with something like a bee bath, like a very shallow little bowl to provide water to insects who might be having some difficulty if there's not a stream nearby that hasn't rained in a while, just providing a little bit of water for them. In addition, having a variety in your garden of different microhabitats, so a variety of plants, of course, but also having little microhabitats with something like a compost pile. One thing you can do to attract a lot of flies, especially those who decompose at some point in their life stage, which many of them do, is adding leaf litter or vegetable scraps to your garden. So this could be just as easy as taking your leftovers after cooking, throwing them in the corner of the garden, and I guarantee within a few minutes you will start to see some flies who can then add some beneficial efforts to your garden. As always, reducing pesticide use is always a great idea. And when having a variety of different insects in your garden, so many of them are effective predators that you'll see some of the benefits of something called integrated pest management. So using more natural methods to try to maintain a healthy ecosystem in your garden, rather than using so many pesticides that can very quickly decimate populations of insects. And then if it's possible in your area, always great to think long-term as well, but to encourage the protection of areas that we see flies breed in the most, which are generally things like riparian areas, riparian buffers, meadows, and forest openings are where we're going to see the most flies. A lot of flies really like staying at forest edges. You might notice if you go and look, if your backyard is up to a forest, or if a park is near a forest, you're going to see a lot of fly activity right at the edge of that forest. And so that, in addition to riparian areas, are places that we want to be able to be protective of and be mindful if there's an option for you to voice your opinion on protecting those areas. So just a few take-home points. We have a lot of information and a lot of really cool stuff going on with flies, but I just wanted to share a few of the very cool families that are the most impactful here. Flies are our essential pollinators. They're number 2 in impact after bees, very closely behind, and are quite underrated. They just aren't a group that people know much about. But with having 200,000 species, I'm excited to share the word and get that out a little bit. In addition, flies are really important because they're pollinating a lot of low reward flowers, things that other insects might not be going to. It would be too much energy to go to them. The flies are still visiting for purposes other than just pollen collection, but they're still there grabbing pollen on all their hairs, and so it's very valuable. Flies are also pollinating in really difficult environments. They're pollinating in areas that bees might not be able to get to, that might be a little bit too hot, a little bit too cold for bees, too windy for bees. If there isn't a super large native selection of species of bees, wasps, butterflies, and moths in an area high up on mountains or such, flies are often still able to survive because they're near human settlements, and so they'll do really well that way. Most flies are visiting flowers at some point, and so it's always just nice to try to keep an eye out, especially looking for fly mimics. There are a lot of very tricky looking flies that are really easy to mix up with bees, and so look really closely the next time you see something in your garden and see if it has 2 wings and not 4. They are incredible mimics and they really get away with it often. The families that we're the most interested in that you should keep an eye out for are going to be flower flies, bee flies, and blowflies, which are the most impactful as far as our recorded pollination efforts, as well as what we understand about their life cycles. However, 150 different families of flies, there is so much still left for us to learn. Flower flies in particular are extremely cool because they're doubling as both pollinators and really effective biocontrol. So trying to get some of those in your garden, keeping an eye out for them is a great idea. And as always, be sure to plant native and keep an eye on the visitors to your garden. We recommend a lot of really awesome citizen science projects like iNaturalist and Seek, where you can take a photo of a plant or an insect, upload it, and have community experts identify that. And so we can have a better idea of the populations and distributions of the animals and plants around us. So thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad to be able to be here, get to chat a little bit about my favorite animals. So this was a real pleasure. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them into the Q&A or to email me at my NC State email address. And if you're interested, I'm on Twitter. I talk about flies, and I'm also part of a little fly outreach group called Team Diptera. So feel free to check me out there if you're interested. And thank you very much for your time.
That is so cool. Team Diptera. That, yeah.
I love it so much.
Gonna go find that on Instagram.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ezra. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Maegan.
All right.
Maegan Luckett is the horticulturist for the Blomquist Garden of Southeastern Native Plants at Duke Gardens. Please don't tell Annabelle I butchered that again. In the Blomquist, Maegan is able to marry her twin passions for ecology and horticulture. While she is fascinated by all the native plants in North Carolina, she is particularly fond of the flora of the sandhills and the coastal plain. Whoop, whoop. Currently, Maegan is a part-time master's student at NC State researching the intersection of insect pollination behaviors and horticultural design. She looks forward to having more opportunities to educate the public about how their landscapes can help pollinators and by putting what she learns into practice in the Blomquist. So take it away.
All right. Okay. Perfect. From beginning. All right. Nope. Is it showing the
It's showing presenter view.
Dang it. Okay. How did y'all do that before?
Go ahead and start the presentation, and then you can flip back to whenever you select share screen, you can select the presentation. We practiced this before the webinar started. I don't know why it's doing this now.
No. Okay, so start from beginning and then share.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And slideshow. Sorry, everybody. Okay. I'm not great at this. Let's see here. From beginning. Okay. It might be that they'll just have to look at the slides. I'm not working out well for me. Let's try one more thing. Okay. Nope. Okay. All right. Sorry. We'll just go with this. All right. Sorry. My name is Maegan Luckett, and I'm the horticulturist of the Blomquist Garden of Southeastern Native Plants. As Amanda said, I'm not technically inclined, so I apologize. You'll get to get a preview of what I'm going to be talking about before I start talking about it. Anyway, so real quick, I want to talk about pocket prairies at Duke and some work that we've done as spinoffs from our Piedmont Prairie. So those of you who are familiar with Duke Gardens, you may know about our Piedmont Prairie work. If not, I'm here to tell you a little bit about it. So what exactly is a Piedmont Prairie? So it's a landscape that is largely extinct from nature at this point, unfortunately. If you can see up here where I'm sort of circling the word Caroline on the map, just north of that, there's a word in small little letters that say Grand Savane. And this is a map from, I think, like the 1600s. A French explorer whose name escapes me currently made this map. But what we know about the Piedmont Prairie is, you're probably reading along, is due to John Lawson, who was a British explorer who went all over the Carolinas and he was a naturalist, and he looked at the ecology of the area, the native populations, what they were doing, the flora, the fauna, and he kind of gave us what we know about this area. And he spoke a lot about these kind of open areas between the forests. So not like what we experience now in the Southeast. It was actually, there were some grasslands, more like what you have in the Midwest, but they would be anything from like an acre in size all the way up to, miles wide. And so what we do know about this landscape is that it was that it was a disturbance regime was required for it. So whether that be fire, that could be an anthropogenic fire created by the indigenous people that lived in the area, or it could be fire from lightning strikes. We actually have a lot of, I don't know why this is the case, but we have a lot of incidents of lightning in the Southeast. So fire was a large component of keeping the woody material down. And then secondarily, there was large herbivores in the area, bison even, that kind of preferentially ate the woody material. And so that sort of kept their area open. And so that we know about this thanks to John Lawson. So anyway, that is what Piedmont prairies were historically before large swaths of European settlers came in and kind of changed the landscape. So why and what are the plants that we're interested in? Why would we be interested in them in the garden setting? So they tend to be very robust plants. They're adapted to the regional soil. And if you know anything about the soil in North Carolina, it's varied, but it also can be tricky to work with in a garden setting. So that's one kind of good thing about these plants, is that they are adapted to our regional soil and climate. They're often very drought resistant, so they can be deep rooted. Some of them have tap roots that go down for 10 feet or more. The grasses, for instance, have lots and lots of biomass, and so they can retain a lot of moisture. And then they, of course, have evolved with the insects of this area, so our pollinators. And so these are sun-loving plants too, but they also can often be somewhat shade tolerant and have different soil types that they can work with. Yeah, I know, Ezra, I can't figure out how to get out of the presenter view. Sorry. So everybody gets a preview of what I'm going to talk about before I talk about it. So after doing a little bit of research, and when I say we, this is not me. I didn't start until 2018. So this is work that was done before I started. So the Bloomquist Piedmont Prairie was started in 2015. So we had, there was about an acre or so of former pine, like loblolly pine stand that we had that wasn't really being used for anything. And we wild collected seeds off of roadsides in Orange and Durham counties, which is kind of where some of these sun-loving, sun-requiring plants are now kind of relegated to the edges of. So we based kind of what this Piedmont Prairie would be on just like sort of research and then that plant availability of what is on sort of the roadsides. Again, this, as you're probably reading, is sort of like our interpretation of what this might have looked like, because there is so much hydrological difference and so much soil type difference across the Piedmont. It could be different in different places, but this is sort of like our best guess at it. So Annabelle Rennick, who is the curator of the Bloomquist, she actually went out and collected the seed from the roadsides. So she's got like about 115 different species that she collected. There's about a initial ratio of about 60% forbs. I'm sorry, I actually have that backwards. 60% grasses to 40% forbs that went into the prairie. So as I mentioned before, this is a disturbance regime is required to keep these things open. And so we've tried to kind of recreate some of those regimes with burning. So right before I started in 2018, they actually burned the prairie when it was about 3 years old. And then again, we burned it in 2024 to try to kind of keep refreshing sort of the biodiversity and also keeping any woody material down. And so we do also something, this is part of our maintenance regime, we do something called buffaloing 1 to 3 times annually. So I feel like I learned a lot from the presentation today from Hannah and Elsa about when to cut. So that was super helpful for me too. But what we do is we'll cut down kind of the material from the previous year, and then we will selectively go back and what we'll do buffaloing, take down the more aggressive species that have kind of come to dominate over the years, and that will be cutting those back will allow more of the grasses and smaller forbs to come to the fore. So that's sort of how we maintain it. So we managed to garner some interest in with our prairie, and so we thought, how else could we utilize this kind of planting in other types of spaces? So like an urban context, like a parking lot, we thought that it would be potentially beneficial for the following reasons. So it could provide food and habitat for birds and pollinators, where, you know, a sod median would not do so probably. And it could potentially act as maybe a corridor. For instance, you've got some woodlot or some, you know, a meadow on one side of a theoretical parking lot, and then some interesting plants on the other side. Maybe having these sorts of medians could act as like a linear corridor between those places. Also, we would hope that it would reduce chemical and mechanical inputs of having to mow them regularly. As well as this one, you know, this is the science isn't there. I'm not testing this, but we thought it could help if you did this en masse. You could mitigate urban heat island effect from all of the pavement around it. It also could maybe mitigate excess water from rain events due to the permeability of the soil. And then lastly, it just could soften otherwise dull or unused spaces. You know, if you're imagining like a Target parking lot with your little medians of grass, what would be more attractive would be, you know, I would hope everyone would agree that the picture that I have depicted here would be more appealing than just some sod. So that was kind of our rationale for start implementing this experiment. And so in 2019, we did sort of a proof of concept plot at a adjacent parking lot. So adjacent to Duke Gardens is Duke Hospital, and between the two of us, we have parking areas. And there was some medians there that our facilities personnel were gung-ho to let us try this experiment, because that's one less thing that they have to mow. So we did our initial proof of concept, and we did this in July of 2019. We actually planted all of this stuff. And so the points that we were considering while selecting plants is that we wanted things that were from the prairie that would be 2 feet or under. So some of these prairie plants that we have can get to be, you know, very, very tall. If you've ever been to the Bloomquist and you've seen it, they can get to be, you know, 8-10 feet in some instances, like the ironweed, for instance. So we wanted plants that were going to be small enough that people could see over for their to see where their cars were. We also needed about 2 to 5 blooming species per season. We wanted things that would be both attractive to pollinators and the public. We wanted something that would be relatively easy to maintain, so something we just, you know, cut down once a year. Again, I've learned a lot about when to cut things down, because I have actually mitigated, you know, or I've changed when I do my winter and spring cleanup, so now I know more about that. And then we also wanted something that required no irrigation after the initial planting or fertilization ever. And then we used primarily ecotypes that we grew in-house. That we did have a couple of cultivars like grasses, for instance, but in essence, we wanted things that would be, you know, as a proof of concept, these things that would be in the prairie. So how did it go? Within the first year, we saw a tremendous amount of pollinator activity. We saw, as you see there, we had monarch caterpillars on our milkweed. We had a bunch of different types of bees, hoverflies, and blowflies probably as well, apparently. There were birds, hummingbirds, goldfinches. So yeah, it was pretty much immediately, as soon as things started blooming, we started seeing things coming around, even though there's some trees on either side, but for the most part, it's a pretty desolate, open space, but we still were able to draw some pollinators. The public feedback was generally pretty good, unless you have to cross across it, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. But the people who were walking along, so the hospital is over here, there's parking on either side, so if people had to cross through it, that maybe that was a little bit more dicey, but the people who were going alongside of it thought it was absolutely beautiful. So, and yeah, we only had to water that first year once. I think we had a day in October, it was 98 degrees, and we had to water that once, but thereafter we've never actually had to water, and the vast majority of the plants did really, really well. But we did, 5 years on, we did, kind of in retrospect, look, we had to consider how things have gone and what some of the challenges were. So weed pressure is a real thing. I mean, you can kind of see from this photograph here on either side of the plantings, we had to create a bit of a buffer where we just had mulch because the cars would kind of pull in as far as they could. And so we needed space for cars to be able to park. And that, of course, is a place where weeds can kind of take root and move inward. So as far as maintenance goes, weeds are always going to be part of the thing, unfortunately. And then, as I mentioned in the last slide, I think we intentionally did put in a few areas, little walkways with a flagstone that people could go from one side of the median to the other. But I think, you can't see them necessarily at a distance if you're coming from one side to the other when cars are parked. So people just started kind of creating their own cut throughs. So which also is more surface areas for weeds to go in. So if we had to do it again, we'd probably do more regular cut throughs. And then the plant dynamics, nothing is static. Some of the plants that we originally put in, the echinacea, for example, that's kind of a shorter lived species sometimes, especially if the lower leaves get kind of crowded out. So they've maybe gotten outcompeted, though it's good to know the solidago and the pycnanthemum that we do have still are wonderful pollinators and good for stem boring insects. So, and we found where areas of kind of patchiness, and I don't know if that's from cut throughs or what, but I think we're going to go back through and add some more stuff and continue just sort of watching how this space evolves now that it's 5 or 6 years on. How are we doing for time, Amanda?
You have 6 minutes.
Okay. All right, good. Let's go back to current slide. Come on, just okay. What slide can you see? Sorry, are you looking at, because I've got 2 screens up, so I'm not sure what people can see and what.
We still see
additional
your
experiments. What's that?
Yep, additional experiments. Yep.
From current slide. Okay. Am I still on the presenter screen?
No, you're still in just the PowerPoint.
Okay. Sorry. Again, sorry, everybody. Okay, so just real briefly, so since we did our initial experimental plots, our proof of concept, we've done a few additional things, and I won't go through all of them, but we've done some kind of timing for warm season grasses when it's best to plant. I sowed seed instead of using plugs. All of these I probably should have mentioned were ones that we propagated in-house to be plugged size, and then we planted them in. And then lastly, I'll briefly mention my master's project, which is kind of ongoing. So this one I thought would be sort of interesting to talk about. This is it was kind of a multi-stage project. Yes.
We can't, we're just in your we're just in your PowerPoint thing. There you go. I didn't know if you want to
do it. Yeah, because it's not letting me.
Okay.
From current slide. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. So the cultivar plot size trial. So this is sort of a multi-stage thing. So we kind of wanted to see if if cultivars of native plants were robust nearly as the straight species, which is what we primarily used before. So if you're not familiar with the term straight species, that's what you'd find in nature. So that's your Echinacea purpurea, whereas cultivars are the ones that are bred and have, named cultivars. So they, bred for whatever characteristic you're interested in. So sometimes they may or may not be as strong as the straight species. So we wanted to see if in this context, they were quite as robust as the straight species that we used before. And so we selected all cultivars, and then so that was the first thing. And the second thing is we wanted to see if planted at 2 different sizes of like pot container, like what the survivability would be, and if they could, like, let's say a larger one could grow faster then the smaller one, would that outcompete weeds? So basically I didn't weed, I just planted these plants directly into the soil after clearing them and just kind of let everything grow, weeds and grasses and plants. And then I kind of took a 1 meter square, you can kind of see down on the bottom in that picture, I hope, this wood square, and I use that as sort of my plot divider, and I kind of look to see how much plant to weed sort of presence there was in that square, to see like if the plants could outcompete weeds. And so I looked at the weed competition of the two sizes, and then also like by species, if that makes sense. So what I found was that if a fast growing and both tall and wide plants seem to do the best at suppressing weeds. So for instance, this this Rudbeckia did pretty well at suppressing weeds because it was both tall and wide. There was a plant called, it was like an aster that's sort of prostrate, sort of grew flat, that I was really hoping would be great to use on the edges, that buffer area that I showed earlier for weed suppression. And unfortunately, while it did cover the ground, the weeds just kind of grew up through it. So what we found is that really you need things that are going to be wide, but also tall. And as far as which of the two sizes worked better, initially, as you might expect, the larger ones grew wider faster, but the smaller ones eventually did catch up as well. So it kind of doesn't really matter which size you put it in, like whether it's a large gallon size container or whether it's like a 4-inch pot in terms of survivability. They all kind of did pretty well. And then, so if we have time, I'll talk really quickly about this master's project that I'm working on. So my thesis kind of overall is, do people and pollinators like the same thing, for obviously different reasons? So are people attracted to form and color and order, aesthetic value, whereas insects, are they also attracted to form, order, and color, but for different reasons, like floral constancy with bees, and then ease of pollen collection, or, maybe Ezra would say a lot of insects for the flies to prey on. What could, are they attracted to the same things that we are for different reasons? And so how I'm kind of trying to figure that out is I wanted to see if different design patterns would be attractive to people, and would also insects be attracted to them. So in the end, the end point is, does it matter how we design our pollinator gardens? Are there pollinator garden designs that are more efficient at attracting both people and insects? So basically what I've done is I've done 3 design formats. So basically a clump format. So I've got 6 different flower or summer blooming flower species where I've got them in clumps. So like, let's say I've got 5 of that one type of plant in this part of the plot, and then a few more over here. So they're all kind of in clump distribution. And then I have ones that are called drifts, which is sort of like, think of it as being sort of like a ribbon. So it's all one type together in a ribbon, like 6 in a row, sort of diagonally, and then another 6 of another species, and so on and so forth, to create this sort of like drift effect, which is a common landscape design principle. And then lastly, I did a random distribution. So, like a Leotris here, Echinacea here, and just sort of having it random all over the place. Would people find that disorderly, perhaps? Or maybe insects wouldn't, it's too far to go from that Leotris to over here. And so would that make any difference? And so the plots themselves, yes.
It is time. You want to finish up real quick?
Yep. And then this is the picture of what that looks like, by the way, sorry. The master's project piece. And then, and so that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm going to do the bulk of that research next year. I've planted them in, but they need to get a little bit more filled out. So that's what I'm going to do next year. And then that is it. Again, I apologize for my lack of being able to handle Zoom. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Maegan. I appreciate that. It happens to the best of us, and you pulled yours up earlier, so you know what you're doing. And I know that sometimes
Presumably
Zoom will do that to you sometimes. So with that, thank you, ladies, so much for your presentations. That was an incredible diversity of information, and I hope everyone has gleaned something from that. I love how everybody's learning from each other, even just within the webinar. So Charlotte, I know that we've had some questions and answers coming through the Q&A. Do you want to walk folks through some of those? And participants, if you have questions for the speakers, please put them. If you go down to the bottom of the screen and click Q&A, you can put a question in for any of the speakers right now.
All right. Yeah, we've had some great questions and responses. So you'll see the answered questions under the answered category. But we started off with somebody asking a question about participation. If they had people visiting from other states, so folks that live in Virginia or Tennessee, where the census isn't held, but they're in North Carolina during the time of the census, can those folks visiting North Carolina participate? So my response was yes, because they would be recording pollinator activity in North Carolina, which is the important part. You agree, Amanda? You're shaking your head. So the important part is that it happens in North Carolina. You don't necessarily have to reside in North Carolina year round to participate. Just come to North Carolina and do the census here. So we'd love for people to involve their guests if you've got folks coming into town during the census dates. We also had some folks who shared what's going to be happening in their counties. So we love seeing that, both Surrey County and at least one other county were sharing some of their activities. And Amanda, you posted the link to a Google form where we're asking Master Gardener volunteers, if you're hosting events in your county, then please, we'd love to get the information about them. I don't think that's limited to Master Gardener volunteers. Would you like people? Yeah, so any events that are being held to promote the Great Southeast Pollinator Census in North Carolina, there's a link to a form where you can let us know what is happening in those events, where they're going to be held, and we'd love to hear about that. We had some specific questions about insects. Are fruit flies the same as flower flies? And they're actually different types of flies. So I was going to, Ezra, I was going to reach out to you in chat and say, you must know Matt Bertone at the Plant Disease Insect Clinic, because he is a huge fly fan as well. He is always showing us a close-up picture about how beautiful a specific fly is. So
he's a very good friend. He's a very good friend. He was unable to make it, unfortunately. He just got back from fly school, actually, a week-long training event in flies. And so he was like just getting back. And so I'm very happy to be able to join in his stead. He is amazing. Absolutely. Highly recommend people look up Matt Bertone if they have a chance. He has amazing photography and work online.
Yes. Some other questions that actually came in during your talk that Elsa helped respond to about bee baths. Somebody asked about rainwater, but would tap water be okay if you needed to refill? And Elsa said, yeah, that the tap water would be okay because the chlorine evaporates quickly over a large surface. And then you had responded to the question about using uncomposted leaves and veggie scraps in the garden in addition to compost. So yeah, that works. That compost is excellent by itself. Yeah, so thank you for responding to those answers in the chat. And then a really important question, which we've talked about before in other webinars, which people are always interested to know, is about if they cut back their plants and lay the stems on the ground. I've actually personally asked this question myself of Elsa. Will that work? Will the bees be able to nest in them? And Elsa says she doesn't recommend putting them on the ground because they'll mold and be, on the ground. They'll be exposed to a lot more moisture and break down more quickly. So even if they get detached or you cut them off, if you could somehow position them upright in the garden like they would naturally be standing upright, and she suggests a large vase or pot, and she's seen people weave them into low decorative wattle fencing. That would be interesting garden addition to add them to fencing. So that would be a way to manage them. And I see there's more questions even coming in now. Do we want to handle some of those live? Do you want me to read them out, Amanda, and have folks respond to them live? Okay.
Let's
We'll
do it.
move over there. All right. So going to the questions that haven't been answered yet. Dennis Testerman says he'd love to hear about insect galls as a particular use of living forb stems. So we have somebody who wants to jump in and tell us about insect galls. Any takers? Hannah's going to
It's a
jump in.
STEM question, so I'll jump in, but I'll say, I don't know. I really don't know. I think there's a lot we still don't know about all the different types of galls. And usually they're on larger plants than the little stems we're working on in our garden. Not that they don't happen, but if Elsa or Ezra have other stuff, you can jump in.
Yeah, I don't have
Not-
a lot to add. That info is out there, but it's not in my head. Like there's a variety of insects that can make galls on plants, from like wasps to flies to aphids, and then there are also some viruses that can cause it. There's somebody who makes galls in goldenrod stems. I don't remember who it is, but those are something you'll definitely see turning up in gardens, and they aren't like, I don't think they're particularly harmful to the plant. They're just like another thing. But yeah, I don't have a lot on that. Ezra, I think you were about to say something too.
I was about to agree that there are lots of flies that make galls, but I'm not familiar with forb stems. So just reiterating what y'all said, that's out of my wheelhouse a bit, but just putting it out there. Flies are involved as well. It's gonna be the answer in a lot of situations.
Yeah, and you definitely do see those galls on the goldenrod stems, like you mentioned. And I've seen articles and things on goldenrod before, touting them as like one of the best plants for a variety of different insects, including because of the galls. There was a question about whether the slides would be available to Master Gardener volunteers for education. So I think that's going to be up to all of our individual presenters if they're willing to share their slide. To see Ezra's given a thumbs up. So Amanda, I'm sure will collect those resources and send them out with the recording, so that if people have opportunities to use them to teach others, then there'll be a resource there. Let's see. Uriel says she'd like to hear about the results of Maegan's master's project research. Is that something you can share, Maegan? Some
I
quick
don't.
points?
Yeah,
Or
no, I
still
don't.
working
I don't
on it?
actually have it yet.
Okay.
As luck would have it, Elsa's actually part of my advisory committee. So, so just to tie all that in, she's been a huge help on helping me develop like how to observe the insects. But yeah, no, that's largely going to happen next year, because that's a good thing, I guess, about having a full-time job and being a part-time master's student, is it can kind of just go on for a while. Yeah, I planted everything in the winter time, and the plants are kind of too small for those design elements to be kind of ascertained. So it's going to be next year. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you're interested, we can hook you up with all kinds of opportunities to present and share that information.
Sure.
Let's see. We've got a question. Somebody's plant that they're going to observe for the census has aphids on it. Should they still use it as their collection point? No reason.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
totally
no.
use it. I mean, if the plant is flowering and there's still insects visiting it, go for it. There are some, I mean, aphids are ubiquitous in the ecosystem. You know, plants a lot of times can usually withstand being having, their juices sucked on, while they also continue with their lives. And it might be an opportunity for you to assess that plant's health. But if it's flowering and insects are still visiting the flowers as pollinators, go for it.
Absolutely. All right, we've got a request. I guess this is for all of our speakers, if they can post generally available articles you've published that might be relevant. Maybe that's part of what could be collected as some of the the follow-up resources that go out, or our speakers, if you have those links ready right now, you would have to drop them here, I guess, in the Q&A for our participants to see them.
You can go ahead and
let's
email them
see.
to me and I will send them out in the follow-up email.
Okay, great. And a question from Stella. I'm sure it depends on the cultivar or species, but are straight species more robust than cultivars?
Yeah, I would say it depends. I was actually quite surprised to see some of the cultivars perform as well or better than some of the straight species. So it kind of depends. But there were some instances where I didn't have anything completely die out. But I don't know if you're familiar with catmint, but I had a straight species and cultivar, and the pollinators seemed much more attracted to the straight species than the cultivar. But then in other instances, there were cultivars that were more attractive to pollinators. So it sort of depends, both in terms of attractiveness and survivability. So like everything in science, it depends.
And I'll add to that. So at Mount Cuba Center in Delaware, which is obviously a little further north than us and a wee bit different in terms of their climate, but they have a very robust native plant trialing program. So each year they select a different group of native plants and they plant kind of a wild type, and then they just look at all the horticulture industry and plant all the different cultivars that are available and do a 3-year study, which includes pollinator data as well. And all of the research that they have done, they publish in very beautiful PDFs that are freely available to people. So that is something I can include in my follow-up email. But yeah, Mount Cuba Center does a great job with their native plant trialing. The Chicago Botanic Garden also has a very robust native plant trialing program, but they're obviously in Chicago. So really plant performance is very, very different in Chicago than it is in North Carolina or the Southeastern United States.
And I had one quick thought on cultivars, that, like Megan said, it depends. And I think it also depends on why you're interested in that plant. So if you're interested in planting it to support pollinators, then just make sure that cultivar is producing nectar and pollen, because sometimes with the breeding, the pollen gets taken out of that specific cultivar. If you want it for aesthetics, that's great. You can pay attention to the aesthetics. So I think the services that that plant provides can inform which cultivar you select, and just keep that in mind.
And thank you for that point, Hannah. I just want to say one additional thing. So like things that are highly modified from the original, as a rule of thumb, are more likely, I think, to be less effective at having pollinator and ecological services. Like, so for instance, your echinacea that is like triple, quadruple blooming. I mean, it's basically, as I understand it, all of the nectaries have essentially been converted into more petal bearing structures. And so that basically it can't really provide or can't produce nectar anymore. So kind of, if you're thinking of things that are like double, triple, whatever blooming, maybe kind of shy away from those. But sometimes things that are cultivars can maybe even be more beneficial. Like if it has like a it may, I mean, and this is me just speculating, but they may have more nectar that is being produced, or we just don't know. It's a very complicated subject, but the closer it is to the original, better on the whole, I think.
Yeah, I think there's also been some studies like different leaf color. Like if something usually has green leaves but has purple leaves, it might not be as good as a host for like caterpillar larvae that would feed on that species. So yeah, trying to stick closer to the natural form.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Generally. Okay, so we had a question about where to get the counting form, and I'm just going to answer that one right now. So the counting form is available on the Great Southeast Pollinator Census website, which is gsepc.org. And it's right there on the homepage, but it's under where it says join the count. And under number 2, join the count, one of the things you can download is the counting sheet. So that's where you'll get that. Amanda also has an excellent webpage with resources specifically for the count in North Carolina. So I know she's included that with the information that's been available, go out afterwards. We had some great information shared. The only name I can see is Feldmat.
It's Tracy Feldman from
Oh, okay, great.
goodness. Tracy, I always forget what your full title. He's from a state environmental agency. Just put it that way.
Okay, excellent. Just some really interesting information about galls, that she's been studying them for 10 years, and help identify some new species. And she's found overwintering gall insects in Verbacina stems, that wing stem, the kind of yellow flowering, blooms late summer and fall. And there's several goldenrod gall flies and even a gall moth. And some gall insects make galls we can't see from the outside of the stem, so they're cryptic. So just because you don't see that obvious bulge, there could still be galls in there. So that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing. We got a question about which insects pollinate, I think kabocha squash. Kabocha squash. Does anybody know, does our native squash bee pollinate most species of squash?
Yeah, anything in the genus Cucurbita. So all of the sort of squash, pumpkins, gourds, like not cucumbers and watermelons, but all the ones with big orange flowers are super attractive to squash bees. And they're excellent pollinators of squash. They get up early, they get the job done before other bees even get up. But there are other bees who can also pollinate squash. You'll also see honeybees and bumblebees and a variety of little sweat bees visiting them. And they all contribute. If you don't happen to have squash bees in your garden, you'll still get your squash pollinated. Sometimes people don't always know that squash plants have separate male and female flowers. I know when I first started growing zucchini, that threw me for a loop. I was like, oh, nothing's getting pollinated. I'd have these big, beautiful flowers, and then nothing would set fruit. They usually pump out a few male flowers before they start making female flowers. And then the pollen has to get transferred from a male flower to a female flower for them to set fruit. So you don't even have the potential to get a squash from every single flower. But yeah, some thoughts on squash pollination.
All right, excellent. And Tracy shared her title. She's the assistant manager at Durant and Horseshoe Farm Nature Preserves.
And
sounds like a great
Tracy
place to study galls.
Tracy is a he, him.
Sorry. Okay, thank
He
you.
works for the city of Raleigh.
Okay.
I accidentally clicked the button. Sorry, Charlotte.
No problem. Yeah. All right. I think we've caught up with all of our questions. And reviewed those that have been answered. So
I will say one more thing. Dawn asked how many folks joined us today. So we had about 120 people join us live. And right now we have 458 people who requested a link to join us. So about a 450 person reach across the southeastern United States. So thank you everyone for joining us. Is there anything else I've missed, Charlotte?
no, I think we've caught all the questions. And it's been extremely interesting. I'm glad I was able to be part. Thank you for inviting me.
Most definitely. Well, I think we've definitely got some future research to present to the Extension Master Gardener volunteers in North Carolina. I'm super excited about what you're doing, Maegan. And Ezra, I wish you all the best in the last 2 years of your PhD, hopefully 2 years of your PhD. And Elsa and Hannah, thank you for all you guys do for us in extension here in North Carolina and really helping us live that research-based knowledge mission that we have through the work that we do at Extension. We're really able to provide some cutting edge information like your STEM study. We can really actually do something that is useful for our pollinators. So thank you all for joining us today, all of our speakers, moderators, and all of you out there who have been promoting the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. Thank you so much for your time and your efforts. And if you're learning about the census for the first time joining us today, please, 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 for 2024, it is August 23rd and 24th, and you can do it in your backyard. You can do it at a garden. All you got to do is download the data sheet off of the Great Southeast Pollinator Census website. You can do it with your kids and your grandkids, by yourself, with a group of people. Just spread the word, and we will see you next year. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.